Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today I am absolutely delighted to be joined once again by Liz Webster, who's on the show before, founder of Safe British Farming, owner of the same YouTube channel of the same name, and a farmer and an activist, I guess how you would almost call yourself these days.
Probably campaigner.
Campaigner. Okay, yeah, campaigner is probably better. Activist is a bit of a tainted word. Anyway, you're here to talk about the proposed changes to inheritance tax rules and other taxation rules surrounding farming and agriculture that's caused quite a stir this week in the United Kingdom. So I just wanted to read out to begin with a couple of the proposed changes so people get a bit of context if they're not familiar with what's been going on. So basically, they want to change the agricultural land relief for inheritance tax and allow the first £1,000,000 to continue to have 100% relief for no inheritance tax. And for assets valued over £1,000,000, the relief will be reduced to 50%, resulting in an effective inheritance tax rate of 20% on excess value. This farms of up to £3,000,000 can be passed on without paying inheritance tax if the property is jointly owned by a couple, considering individual tax-free allowances and residence zero rate bans. The tax can then be paid over 10 years without interest, unlike other inheritance tax where payment might be required immediately. There's some other changes to agricultural property relief and business property relief, but I think we will get onto that a little bit later. But do you want to give people just like a brief overview of like why has this caused such a stir in your mind, and why did so many farmers turn out in London to protest this?
Yeah, it's the straw that's broken the camel's back. Farms have been under duress really since the 1980s and the birth of Tesco. You might not be as old as me, but when I was young, we didn't have big supermarkets. We used to have little corner shops. There were sort of spa shops, and Tesco flew under Margaret Thatcher's reign, and many changes happened then, which gave power to the supermarkets to force down farm gate prices. In essence, that, without going into all the boring detail, that is what's been going on over the last few decades. And we were safer in the European Union because the French farmers and the German farmers have always been much more powerful than we have been, because historically, going back to the repeal of the Corn Laws, we had an industrial revolution, which meant that a lot of people left the land and went into cities, and there's this massive disconnect between farming and the cities. And we also lost control of food provenance, because we used to be world leaders in food provenance, actually. But because the empire was then redirected to feed us, and we went down to just before the First World War, I think we were down to less than 30% self-sufficiency, which is why we nearly starved in 2 world wars. And then we had the Dig for Britain campaign. We lost the empire. And then the sensible Labour government decided that there was really only one way to, and the Conservatives agreed, the only one way to secure Britain was by joining the European project, of which we were actually at the heart of designing it after the war with the Americans. So in essence, that's where we are with it. And so then Brexit has happened. Brexit happened because I think people were misled with 5 million different, more than 5 million, 17.4 million different versions of Brexit in people's minds. It was the politics of grievance and vote for change, because people really felt desperate and thought, well, it's got to be better than what we've got. And they believed the misdirection, scapegoating or othering, that the EU was the reason why everything was bad. And that's how we ended up where we are. And Brexit has delivered huge amounts of pain to not just farming, all businesses, particularly if they are in the food business. So fishing, or, anyone that's trying to export or import food is particularly hurt. And also plants, nurseries, or, the flower business now, because the latent checks for imports came in this year, which is now impacting those businesses much more as well. So Brexit isn't over. It's still happening and it's still a live issue. The politicians want you to believe that it's done, but it's still very much here live and wanting to continue with its disaster capitalism. And this phase of the farming taxes and the business tax hikes are part of that. This is disaster capitalism. It's designed to burn off the independent businesses so the big corporations can come in and clean up. So you'll get more big businesses like we have with our utility companies. The rivers is a great one, the water, that they can pour as much shit in there as they like, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. And this system we know exists because largely that is exactly what they have in America for food. It is a system which pumps out whatever it wants. It doesn't have any due regard for who it hurts, as long as they're making huge profits. And that's where I am wholeheartedly opposed to that.
So you actually touch on a lot of themes that I talked about in my first book, Disaster Capitalism. It was all about Brexit and what I thought was going to come next. So a lot of what we've seen proposed by both the Conservative Party and now the Labour Party is very much in line with the things that I feared would happen and play out. And I felt that we were going to see shock after shock exploited to push through policies that people would not otherwise expect or tolerate. Basically, it's like all very much in the vein of Naomi Klein's work, her book The Shock Doctrine, which is absolutely fantastic. If anyone hasn't read it, I talk about it all the time. It basically lays out like disaster capitalism over the past 60 years, essentially, like a history of it across the world. Like it starts with Chile, parts of South America, it goes through like Eastern Europe, post-Russia, parts of Asia, and then how these policies had then been turned on the American population, and I think now being turned on the British and to a certain extent the European population as well. It's really, really worrying to see it. And the thing that really scares me is how many people have lined up in favour of these proposals. And I think what they're missing is the disconnect between like what land actually means for our food supply and what farmers do for the country as a whole generally. Could you maybe speak a little bit to that and sort of explain why this policy will be severely detrimental to our food supply and our food security?
Yeah, I mean, they played a blinder in that they're making out that farmers are rich tax dodgers. But ultimately, what's been going on in these decades of difficulty is that our prices, we have no control of what we buy and we have no control of what we sell it at the end. What we buy is so phenomenally expensive. It actually is frightening, and no sane person would probably do farming. I've said this to my husband so many. You make more money by gambling on the horses than what we do, especially as everything's against us. But a combine harvester is 500,000. A tractor is some 200,000 ish, maybe more, 300. It depends on the size of the tractor. And then you've got to have all of the equipment that you pull behind the tractor. And then you've got the cost of your stock. And then you've got cottages because you've got to have people at work on the farm as well. So it's easy to get up to these numbers. Unless you are, and this is the problem, this is where the Treasury numbers are wrong. So I've got somebody who lives near, well, we've got 2 farms here that are not farms. They're owned by wealthy people. They've got a few acres. They're registered as the farm because they used to be farms years ago. But they're just wealthy professionals who've got an income as a professional, probably a very highly paid job, but they're registered as a farm, and even though they're not farming. And so if you include those properties in the figures, it looks like we've got a lot more small farms than we have. The issue is that over the decades of the crashing of farms, those smaller farms have been broken up. And so, for instance, that land has been bought by other people, and then the farmhouses and a few acres has then served what I would call lifestyle wealthy people. So they're actually protecting the people who can afford to pay the inheritance tax and attacking us, the food growers, whose margins are phenomenal turnovers, millions of pounds turnover, for between 0.5 and 1% profit. So it's just, as I said, when people say Dyson's avoiding inheritance tax, it's a joke, because it's not a good investment, a business investment. It really isn't at this stage. I mean, it might change over the years as the cycles go through. But if you were to look at the hardcore numbers, you have to invest heavily in farms to make farm profitable. And ultimately, that's what he's done. His numbers are not that great. And Jeremy Clarkson's only making a fortune because he's doing farming on television.
Yeah.
Out of the farm.
Yeah.
It's not about inheritance tax avoidance. And the other irony of this is, and he pointed out to the BBC on Tuesday, Jeremy Clarkson, he could put it in trust. Rich people avoid tax by putting it in trust. And the reason that this has happened, it's the shock. We used to be subject to inheritance tax, and it was started to be in 1984, the year around that the Tesco revolution began. Because that's when the profits started to be hammered down. And then in 1992, it was repealed altogether. Now, had they not done that, I don't think as many farms would have continued to farm, because or there would have been riots earlier, probably. Because, it's been sort of like, we're doing this for free, pretty much. Often farms lose money. Because we cherish our family farm, and farmers feel they care more about the farm than they do their own lives and their own wives or their own families. That is how it is. The farm comes first, and I know that's very, very hard for people to understand, but it is a mindset. The farm literally drives everything, which is why we work through the night and do all that we do. And it's feeding the British people. And you only have to look at Sri Lanka and what their government did in 2021. After a series of disastrous decisions, the farmers ended up revolting, and the government were chased out of town. And then the Chinese are in there now, and they've got this free port, which David Cameron was at the front of selling. Up just before until he was back in government last year, he was at the forefront of selling this free port, and it looks as though, yes, they are using the shock doctrine to stress these assets to get them into corporate hands, and we've got the free ports here as well, which seems to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And make no mistake about it, food shortages are coming, but even without the farmers holding produce back because of the Spanish weather, which also impacted Morocco, we're heavily reliant on that region for tomatoes, lettuce, and peppers in the winter period, because the last government didn't keep our greenhouses open with the gas price increases. So those businesses have crashed. 2 huge lettuce growers and all of the Lee Valley growers largely have given up producing food in the winter. So you can see those shortages coming. I mean, they're already beginning to bite.
Yeah. I mean, I did notice actually that the other day when I was in buying tomatoes in the shop, and it was really difficult to find British tomatoes. I think I found some from Kent. They were twice the price. But I think one of the weird things, and like the environment minister sort of suggested that people do something similar to Jeremy Clarkson. And he was like, plan your tax affairs. So they're admitting, like, openly that you should just like try to evade tax and have some like exploit loopholes in order to avoid paying the tax. And do you know who can afford the accountants who will figure out how to do that? the super wealthy.
Well, we generally have got accountants, and of course we can do tax planning, but we've had no warning. They've also put it looks as though that it's not coming in until next year, or 2026. But actually, there's a clawback, so it does come back to this budget date. So yeah, so who knows that if you're going to live 7 years, and it's all very well saying, oh, hand it down when you're 70 to your son. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Your son can die before you, especially as farming is one of the most dangerous occupations. This is really, really bad, and it, to me, it feels like a trap. It feels like it's a trap that was set in 1984, and because the best advice until just before the budget by all advisors was hand on your assets when you die, for those reasons, in case your son dies before you.
Yeah,
and you've got control of your affairs.
Yeah, and I mean,
so
farmers
it's
also, sorry, farmers are also getting hit with a bunch of other, like, I think so. I watched that video you sent me. I'll put it in the description below. It's from Farming Explained, which is a great YouTube channel. Actually, I've been very much enjoying some of the other videos that on that show. Great guy. Really, really explained this issue beautifully. And a couple of other really interesting things that I've been watching, including that the post-war sort of assessment of how the future of British agriculture should look. Anyway, he pointed out that the government are claiming that the £2.4 billion budget for farming is the highest of all time, even though it's been capped at that figure since 2014. So it's the same amount since 10 years, over a decade now at this point. They're scrapping direct payments to farmers. So if you're getting £30,000 from the government in subsidies, that's going to be cut by 76%. And anything above that will be scrapped entirely. So if you're currently getting £100,000 subsidy from the government, it will be, I think, around £8,000 now. They're taxing fertilizer, and as well as raising raising business property relief. It's mind blowing, and
don't forget the attack on the double cap as well of the trucks that we use.
Yeah, that too.
And that's the other offensive. Yeah, I mean, basically, they want us to stop farming. That's what it is. Yeah. Unless you're very, very wealthy and you've got a TV program that can subsidize it.
Yeah, and that's the biggest problem, is that they're claiming to be going after like large, wealthy landowners who are using farmland to avoid tax. And it's like, right, fair enough. I'm all for that. But there's the complete opposite of what the policy is like actually seems to be doing. And someone pointed out, it might have been Ollie in that video, that what will happen is people will be forced to sell some of the farm in order to pay the inheritance tax bill. And people will go, oh, that's fine. They've inherited millions, which, we'll not go into that exactly argument right now. But, okay, say that that's the case. You have to sell off £400,000 of land in order to pay the inheritance tax bill, for example. That will be bought up by someone who is not a farmer, because it's too expensive for farmers, for like a new farmer to start farming that land. It's too small a piece for them to make it profitable. 50% or more of land, I'm just going to get the link up here for people who are watching, 50% or more of the land that gets sold by farmers ends up in the hands of non-farmers. So that is exactly the kind of land that will then be used by people to avoid tax and use the exception of under £1 million in order to hide their money in land that they're not using for farming, not using it productively, and not producing food for the country. It's
or it'll be industrialization, mass intensification, which is going on since Brexit happened. There's over 200 USA-style mega farms opened.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, there's one big fight going on about one in Liz Truss's former seat in Norfolk. It'll be the biggest pig factory, I think, in Europe if they get the permission to go through. And I think that's the thing that really upsets me the most, because the deceit behind it, that they're sort of saying we're going to make British farming, which is actually sustainable, acute farming, it's quite traditional. We've done the same thing. I mean, yes, okay, we use different machinery now, but ultimately the land is used largely in the same way that it used to be used. And then they want to turn us into the American industrialized farms, which are heinous. I mean, just terrible for the environment and terrible for animal welfare and terrible for human health. The whole thing is a massive con. And it just insults your intelligence, because we've had industrialization of chicken for some time. And the pig sector really got going after Brexit happened. If you remember, there was the pig crisis, which Boris Johnson was famously involved in. And so pig numbers have gone up again, and that's because of the industrialization of pigs.
Mm. So what do you think the goal is here? Like, why have the government decided to do this? Like, Keir Starmer last year was talking to the NFU, was saying, farmers don't get listened to. We want to support the farming industry. Like,
lying to the MFU, mean? No, not talking. Yeah, we can now officially say it was lying. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, so like, what are they trying to do here?
He's trying to make Brexit work. But making Brexit work, which Brexit was always intended to deliver the American trade deal. And that is what they're trying to do. And I would say, looking from what I've now looked into, Starmer sat on the fence, and we all thought, us on the Remain side, that he was a Remainer because he campaigned for a second referendum. And now, his chief advisor has won the war with Sue Gray. And Morgan McSweeney is very much linked into this group called Blue Labour, which is led by a guy called Lord Glassman. And he was on GB News podcast recently, claiming that Brexit is brilliant and we should embrace Trump for this industrialization, the reindustrialization of Britain, which I'll take you back to the factories of pigs and chickens and stuff like that. Because look, AI is here and it's only going to get bigger. We are looking at mass unemployment across many sectors. So the belief that there's going to be an industrial revolution which sees huge amounts of humans doing work, I think is not quite tallying with what I don't understand that much about AI, but I do understand that we're going, even in the agricultural sector, robots are going to be doing a lot more work than humans. And the machines have largely taken over a lot of work that humans used to do. And I'm pretty sure that in those factories, there will be a role for robots as well. So I can't, this is what I'm seeing. And interestingly, in the last PMQs of Rishi Sunak, there was this handover between them. They sort of had a love-in. And Rishi actually said to Keir Starmer, make sure that you foster, I can't remember the exact words. I mean, this is, make sure that you foster and you look after, the AI development here. And that is what I'm seeing. Tony Blair has its institution has continually sort of push this as well. And I guess that's what's coming, this tech revolution, this AI revolution, which you can't be a Luddite and be against progress. What I don't like is the deceit and the basic, robbing of people's assets that they've had in their families for years, and they've toiled the land to do, but also what it means for people's food and diet, because if you eat bad food, you don't have a good life, and then you have to rely on, more healthcare. What will happen to our NHS? That's the other thing. Will we go into the American system, which we know full well? You only survive the American system if you're very wealthy, or if you're very lucky. And that's the long and short of it, as I see it. And it is maddening, because people that have fought Brexit on the left are now actually cheering for Brexit, because, yes, go get those millionaire farmers. It's like, this is about your food. Whether you like farmers or not is by the by. Either we feed you or the massive corporations feed you. And this is the decision that has to be made and will be made over the coming days, weeks, months. That is that far. We might well, we'll have to see what happens, going forward. We don't know what other shocks are coming with Ukraine and Russia and all of those other realities. Donald Trump, we don't know what's coming down the line. I'm sure there will be more shocks coming from outside of Britain. But politically, as we stand today, and Andrew Marr yesterday said that he thinks that there's there are some risks to Rachel Reeves' budget. And if the budget doesn't go through, the government falls, or unless they reach a compromise.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
But I certainly can say to you, I have never known farmers as angry as they are. And this will continue to rumble. And they found their voice now. They're united. And that they are going to really, really, really make life difficult for this government.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up for people some of the absolutely maddeningly stupid takes that I have seen over the past few days. Beginning we'll start with Will Hutton, his article in The Guardian. Farmers have hoarded land for too long. Inheritance tax will bring new life to rural Britain. Then Otto English, who I've had on this show and is normally quite reasonable on a lot of things, who said, with 1 in 10 British people classed as fuel poor, my sympathy for the descendants of a few hundred millionaires is frankly limited. Richard Murphy said, farmers need to stop talking nonsense. They're protesting about inheritance tax changes today. Most of them are quite wealthy or they would not be protesting. The Supertansky, when somebody please think of the poor millionaires. Like, I just, the mad disconnect that people seem to have between, it's, I don't understand why. And all of these people as well would normally be in favor of trying to reduce the environmental footprint of our economy, to try and reduce the amount of energy required for food production, or to try and reduce impact upon the planet. And the most environmentally friendly way to consume food is to consume food as close as possible to where you are, made as close as possible to where you are. So food grown in this country, and yet
and not processed,
and yet people are lining up to support a policy that will see us produce less food in this country. And if we do, and even the food we do produce will be produced by mega farms, and the food that we then have to import will be coming at massive cost in fuel, in terms of you can talk about CO2 or just from countries that have lower environmental regulations, lower food standards, and this seems to benefit nobody, right? Except,
well, it does. It benefits the wealthy corporations, and their shareholders.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only people, and honestly, that it makes sense, because that seems to be Keir Starmer and this Labour government's biggest supporters. But it's why do you think people are not quite grasping the importance of quality food grown in this country, food security in an increasingly turbulent world, and the benefits of having a large amount of control over the food we produce and eat? Why are people missing that?
It's psychology, I think, largely. It's the KGB plan of good cop, bad cop, and tribalism. And so people on the left, our lists, can't believe that their team would deliver what is hardcore right-wing disaster capitalism. And so they're sticking with their tribe, and they see farmers as conservatives. And there's also this massive myth that farmers all went and voted Brexit when they didn't. And it's the same psychological thing that people are, hypnotized into believing, and they're not looking into the facts, and they're not even able to hear the facts because they're not absorbing them. And that's what happened with Brexit. The farmers were split on Brexit for the same reason, in that they believed the lies, and we kept saying to them, this is not true, this is what will happen. But they didn't want to believe it because they couldn't believe that would be done to them. And we've got the same now on the left. So it is a very bizarre thing. And then we've got people that are benefiting from that, which is the main arsonist, Nigel Farage. You just couldn't make it up. And there he is taking up on the grievances, exactly as Adolf Hitler did, as the Weimar Republic fell. And I think we largely are repeating the 1930s in Germany, which is pretty terrifying.
Yeah. Actually, that's really interesting. An interview I did yesterday, which will come out after this show, so everyone should subscribe so they can hear this. I was talking to an engineer and economist, but a guy who wrote a book called Bitcoin Nation, and he was talking about how all of the monetary problems that we're currently experiencing are a mirror, like literally verbatim, of the problems that Weimar Germany experienced in the 1920s. And he said he was reading articles from the press from the 20s in Weimar Germany that were literally saying the same things as people are saying today. So it's interesting that you bring up that, and ultimately that's what people are I think worried about when you really get down to brass tacks. Like, they don't want the poverty and the increasing gap.
Hyperinflation. Yeah. I mean, this budget is going to deliver unemployment and hyperinflation. Yeah. They promised to deliver growth, and everyone thought that meant getting rid of the trade barriers. I mean, I spoke to a business person this week who I would say has always been a Conservative voter, who believed in the Labour lies and voted for Labour. And, he's just sort of like, he's got a very good, healthy business, which is totally rocked by this budget. And they're going to have to make redundancies. So people really do need to wake up and start. I mean, I said this about Brexit with farmers. You've got to try and especially if you've got a Labour MP, you've got to email them and you've got to put them under pressure. Those Labour MPs in particular that haven't got large majorities, we need to encourage them to, not fall in line with what is a very dangerous budget. It's as dangerous as Liz Truss's budget, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, the economy didn't, or the markets reacted poorly, but maybe not as poorly as to Liz Truss's budget, but they were like a little bit rocked as well. So I think maybe at least some people in the business community might have realized how bad this might end up being for the country. And there was, but I also think it was quite heartening to see how many people turned out, and there was obviously a lot of farmers there. Like, I went down to the protest and filmed some interviews with people just briefly. And there was also a lot of non-farmers there to show their support for the cause. But what do you think the next move is? So I saw an article about how farmers are trying to sort of think about what they might do next in order to stop this going through. Like, what comes next in this saga?
Well, I hope that what happens is that there's no law breaking done. And that really the activism is well thought out, doesn't disrupt the public too much, and just holds the government to account. The difference is, I suppose, with Brexit, which is because I've been campaigning on these issues before the Labour government got in, and it was really hard to get press coverage because the press was very supportive, the right-wing press very supportive of the Conservatives. And now we've sort of got the polar opposite in that the right-wing press are on side in this campaign, which does make your head hurt a little bit. But you've got to use whatever platforms you can to get your message out. So at the moment, the press are hungry for this information and getting the stories out. So we have to use whatever we can to get that out. And I think you will see a lot of different things happening. So here in our area, we're planning to we're going to take some tractors to Swindon. We've got Heidi Alexander, a government minister, as the MP there. And, we'll take a load of tractors down there and drive around Swindon, and that will be in the local press. She will feel that heat because she's an urban MP, but we're rural around here, and that will take the message into there. But I know it's hit home in Swindon because I went to the dentist this week, and that's in Swindon. And my dentist, the dental nurse, said to me, "Oh my goodness, I've seen all of this going on with the farmers, what's happening. So it's cut through already. But I think if those MPs feel those tractors going past their offices, they're going to be a bit more sensitive, because we want the local people to email them in and say, we're watching you, because that's what we need. We need, when they're voting on this, they need to know that the public are watching.
When is the vote, actually? That's a good question.
I don't know. I think it might be next week. It's quite soon.
Hang on, I'm just Googling 1 second, and we'll have the answer for people so they know when they have to check. Budget UK paper.
I don't know if we've got the order paper through for next week, have we?
Chancellor's speech, 30th of October. Oh, that's not very helpful. Hang on.
Yeah, and I don't think it's clear when the vote is.
Yeah. Which is also a bit crazy when you think about it, but it's absolutely, yeah. I can't believe we've reached this point, but were farmers consulted about this in any way, shape, or form? Like, have you heard that there was?
No, they went to the various farming conferences and lied. And recently, Steve Reed assured the CLA that they wouldn't be coming after inheritance tax. It is super. The lines in Brexit were dreadful, but this is much worse. It's worse. Incredible that they came into office promising to clean up politics, and they've taken us into the depths of the sewer.
Okay, it's set to take place on the 29th of November, apparently, according to Grok.
Okay.
And they are citing Paul Brand, UK ITV news editor, who says the vote will take place in Parliament on the 29th of November. That seems pretty legit. Okay, so next Friday. That's soon. So if people, this podcast will be going out the same day it's recorded. So if people want to get on board and write to their MP, call their MP, do it now. Don't waste any time. Weirdly, I think it was interesting. One of the biggest voices I've seen in support of the farmers has been former Lib Dem leader Tim Farron. Have you been seeing some of the stuff he's been saying?
Yeah, Tim Farron's really good on farming. If he was still leader of the Lib Dems, I'd feel much more optimistic. But he was ousted. Tim is, he's got the right values around this, and he understands it. He wasn't part of the Orange Book movement, which was Paul Marshall and others. Mark Littlewood used to be the press officer of the Lib Dems, and he's now runs the IEA and was the guy that sealed the deal with all of the big American agricultural industries. Yeah, getting access to those in power. Yeah, so it's in our politics is infected with a terrible virus. We haven't paid politicians enough money, and the lobbying system has been infected by very, very wealthy people. More, a lot of money has flowed into very few hands, and that's where we are.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth saying that there was an argument I made in my book about Brexit and about what we would see post-Brexit for all industries, was that there was two visions of Brexit broadly. I think you're right. There was, everyone sort of wanted or imagined something different in the future, but there was what people were like told could happen, and what like the farmers believed might happen. The ones who voted for Brexit, or a lot of the people who voted for Brexit, they were sold this vision that we could invest in the country and build new infrastructure, and start by like rebuilding Britain, to for lack of a better way of putting it. And I don't think that was I don't think it was wrong of them to hope that could be true. But what we've ended up with is the like hardcore neoliberal version of it. And like that's where this like big disconnect comes, where people are still also like defending the idea of leaving the European Union, but not failing to acknowledge that the benefits that were sold to us have not come to fruition as of yet. and are not being pursued either. Like the vision of a prosperous Britain is not the one that we're seeing. You know, the like just as this Labour government were like, you know, we're going to invest, we need growth, and they come into power and it's the literal freaking opposite. I, you know,
Yeah, it's shocking. I remember seeing Steve Baker, hard man of Brexit, being interviewed by RT back in, I don't know, 2018 probably. And I was so shocked by this interview. As you just said, you know, all of this welfare state, the post-war pact, it's all, it's burdened with debt and it's all got to come down. And we had to destroy it all. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is at that point is when I woke up and thought, this is what Brexit's about. They want to destroy everything and then rebuild some form of, you know, neoliberal, yeah, sovereign individual nightmare, which really takes me into Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. That's where, you know, that's where they want to go. And I don't know. We're very late in waking up on, I think, and as to whether we can stem the tide of it, I don't know, because we haven't got any political vehicle to stand against it because they're all rotten.
yeah. Yeah, and like ultimately, I think like what happened at the Brexit referendum was like a rejection of like extreme globalization, like extreme like the neoliberalism that we'd already seen, like starting with Tony Blair, and then you know Trump is like another rejection of that, and then the huge reform vote, like considering that they weren't really a party and like a year before the election is I don't know. I find it like heartening in a way because it looks like people were just they just want to reject the current like system as we have it, like the one party think that we have. You know, the Labour and the Tories are basically to me indistinguishable. Now obviously there's differences you know, there's good MPs in the Labour Party and there's a couple left in the Conservative Party, although dwindling numbers. But you know, I think what British people want is like a vision or someone to come along and present like a way forward that doesn't involve just handing over all of our land, property, and rights to these mega corporations.
Yeah, and it's because we left the European Union that you know our options are very, very limited unless we have someone that turns around and says actually we do need to get back into the European Union and work within those democratic frameworks. But the EU itself, since we've left, as we all know, is going through a terrible time, and there's elections coming up, which mean that the EU itself is under a lot of threat. If Germany does go full far right, you know, that would pull the plug on the European Union.
Yeah, yeah, because they're these like almost sole funder at this point, like the like in terms of like net contributions. And I think like all of all of the governments across Europe and all of the elections, we're seeing like the rise of like quite extreme like anti-establishment like right-wing parties, and all of that to me is just an expression that people are really sick of the system that they're currently experiencing, and it's scary to me as to where like that anger could be exploited. Like that's the bit that I'm most worried about, because then you end up with more tribalism, and more like culture war stuff, and then you know nothing gets fixed. And I feel like most people just want the same thing. You know, they just want, you know, life to be affordable, to be able to have like access to, you know, reasonable public services, like good food, to talk about farming, you know, just to not have to engage in these like really like weird like battles as individuals.
Yeah, well, I was quite shocked to hear Glassman. I don't know if you've watched that bit of him with GB News advocate for, I can't remember the numbers now, but he wants a huge investment in the British Army, which is really unusual for people on the left to be calling for that, given that Nosy is, you know, normally been sort of about more pacifism, and that's been more of the argument of the right wing. But also scary because we all know that the EU has kept peace for decades. And if it falls apart and then we all start engaging in tariff wars, because it is tariff wars that cause war. It's not arguments over, you know, I don't know, political ideology. It is tariffs that start wars, and then a thirst for invading other countries, and that's possibly where what could unfold. And why would anybody want to see another war when we've had many wars on this continent?
Yeah. Interestingly, that guy I was talking about, the author of Bitcoin Nation, he also pointed out that a lot of the hyperinflation in 1920s Weimar Germany was caused by a tariff war between Germany and many other countries, which I did not know, which was another fascinating thing. And again, it's scary. Like there's, I see, I'm not the most, I'm not a huge fan of like endless, free trade agreements with everyone on the planet. Like I feel like that is not great for anyone, because we become really disconnected from the products and things we consume. And it would be, there's a middle ground somewhere to be found between like being completely isolationist and like wanting to have open free trade with everyone. And it despairs me that we can't have someone advocating for that nice middle ground and not just one extreme or the other.
Yeah. I think what they want is that what we have with the because this has always got me with the climate arguments, blaming farming for climate damage, when farmers used to produce food and clothing. And, now you can't sell your fleeces for, they burn the fleeces because they've got no value, because the clothing industry is so industrialized. And when you look at the really good quality products, like I was in New Zealand a couple of years ago, if you look at merino wool, that industry is doing really, really well because the wealthy are able to afford to pay for the quality products. And that is what I think will happen to the food system. The majority will get to eat the industrialized, mass-produced processed food, and the rich will get to enjoy the few farms that survive, and you can buy good fresh food, which is, I think as a liberal, I think when you look at the clothing stuff, it's pretty bad. When you go past these very expensive shops, and then the numbers again are phenomenal, aren't they? Really expensive clothing. That the gap in that has got greater over the last few years. But you think, well, I can go into Zara and buy a jumper for 20 quid, 30 quid, and you wouldn't really know. And okay, it's fine. You couldn't think, well, okay, this I can live with this. But when you're eating something that is killing you, and somebody else is able to eat something which is giving them a longer, healthier life, then that feels very.
Yeah, and ultimately, that's what the American food system is. It's and yeah, that and the same with healthcare, and it becomes this two-tiered society, or several tiered society, where the richest amongst us can have everything, and the rest of us just have to fight over the scraps, basically, and we're forced to subsist on poor.
And that's what we came from when we were in feudalism. It's exactly the same. When you had the barons, before the repeal of the Corn Laws, that's exactly what we escaped from. And we're almost using another repeal of the Corn Laws, another event like that, to undo what was done then, to destroy democracy and freedom and fairness. Yeah, it's a horror show.
Yeah. Well, on that cheery note, I think that's a nice place to finish up. So
just think of V for Vendetta. At the end of that film, they did escape.
They did, yeah. So we all need to get masks and go march to Downing Street.
Yes.
Well, maybe it'll come to that.
Join the farmers.
Yeah.
That's what you've got to do. Back the farmers.
Yeah. So I will put links for all the stuff that we discussed in the description below, for your YouTube channel, for anything that I've brought up and pulled up for people. And is there anything you want to plug apart from call your MP if this is frustrating to you?
email your MP, call your MP, particularly if they're Labour. And follow my YouTube channel and follow me on Twitter. I'm on there, Blue Sky as well. And we're on Facebook, Save British Farming, got a page on there. And yeah, join the revolution.
Well, that's a lovely place to leave things. So yeah, Liz, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much.
Yeah, great to see you, Josh.
Hey, listeners, real quick. Do you ever find yourself sitting watching the stock market like this? Well, now you could instead be ordering my book like this. It's the story of GameStop. You can purchase it with a hoodie, with acknowledgements, or just with the early backers edition. It's all about the GameStop story. It's the real story, not just what you've seen on films. It's exactly what has happened over the last 3.5 years. And with DFE back, I'm finally able to draw a conclusion to my book. Please pre-order it. It really helps me out, and you will get it eventually, I promise. Hopefully this year.